Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about how not taking care of your employees' emotions during an M&A process might kill your company. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Jonathan Bennett. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, Janet. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you could join us on the show today. Can you share a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. I have got a background in management consulting. I've been on the C-suite of a huge hospital here in Canada where I'm located. These days, I'm an executive coach and trusted advisor to CEOs across North America.
Excellent. Well, M&A is obviously, very popular way for companies to grow and expand. And so I think it's an ever-present, reality, but can be really tough for many reasons. What are kind of the things that you see that just to start off that make it difficult? What are companies going to face when they go through an M&A process when it relates to their employees?
Yeah, it's an exciting time, especially for a leader or a founder that might be looking forward to some kind of windfall and or a transition to a new role at a much larger organization, or maybe out of the business altogether. I think that the thing that comes up for me in the biggest way when we think about all the folks that have joined this company and its growth and or have been a part of an organization that's about to be merged. And I think that they're two really different kind of scenarios to unpack a bit, is that the leader or owner or owners have been sitting on this for a good long while. They've been going through some kind of formal process. And if they've been thinking about succession planning and or some kind of buyout, they've probably been dreaming of this day on some deep level for many, many years. So that's all happening inside their head and in their body. And what's not been happening is that all the folks that work for them, those hundreds and hundreds of folks that are going to work every day, they're not coming along on this journey. They're not emotionally preparing themselves for what's about to happen. And it could be that on paper, everything that's about to happen, i.e. merge with another company or get bought or some kind of take, could be ostensibly positive. It could mean more opportunity for professional growth. It could be career advancements. Openings in a much larger company can really propel an employee in a way that they might have felt like they were at a dead end. Who knows? But what is definitely true is that there will be change. And humans, when it comes to change, often struggle, even if it's in their own best interests, even if on paper it looks positive. Change affects us all in lots and lots of different ways. And leaders don't always think a lot about how much time they've had to process, wrap their heads around it, look forward to it, work through it, all the due diligence, all that stuff. That's all happening in secret behind closed doors. Meanwhile, everybody else is probably going to work every day, just doing the work, and they're not thinking that this big thing is about to happen. And so when it does get announced, the leaders are often surprised. In my coaching practice, it's like, what's wrong with them all? Like, this is great. Or, why is everybody freaking out? Like, there's new opportunities, or change. This always happens in business. What's wrong with them, right? And so that's a real founder's mentality, a real, can be a CEO's mentality. And it can really hit everybody from frontline workers to middle management, even up until senior management, who have really been rocked by this potential change.
Well, and I would say, I guess, obviously change in general, there's a lot of fear associated with change. Is there other emotions that you see that are kind of the initial reaction, or is usually the majority of people feeling some form of fear of the unknown?
Yeah, I mean, there's a range of humans in any company, and a range of reactions are going to happen. There's folks, of course, that thrive on change, love change. Wow, a much bigger company. Think of all the new ways that I can grow and expand and position myself for success in this new environment. That's one personality type, one set of circumstances. But there's a full range of other folks there for whom, like it could just be, I'm neutral, I don't know what this means yet. It could be, I am stuck, I'm scared. Other times it just rattles people because of the other things they've got going on in their life that you can't see. You don't know what's happening at home. You don't know what's happening in the doctor's office. You don't know what's happening with their kids. You don't know what their plans were. Maybe they were planning on retiring in 4 years and they had a really nice tight plan. And even if they, quote unquote, survive the transition to the new company, it's going to be a whole bunch of new hard that they're going to do at the very end of their career that they weren't planning on. And some of them might have just joined 12 months ago. And in their hearts and minds, they were making a commitment to this company as it was. And maybe they don't want a much, much larger company to now be a part of. Maybe they precisely came from that environment and they chose a smaller one.
Yep.
And so there's all of that that is theoretically and potentially and often in practical terms in play in any one room. And so leaders can just not hold space for themselves to understand the nuance of it all. And I was literally on a coaching call earlier today, and there was some change being announced. It wasn't a merger change, but it was big change. And this leader said to me, CEO, she said to me, we had this long, complicated conversation. And at the end of it, the manager said to me, well, what does this mean for me and my job? And I realized that she hadn't been able to absorb anything. Like all of the stuff we talked about, nothing was going in because she was still doing me. Because that's what it's like when you're first hearing big information. You tend to just power down. Lots of us power down. And we need time to absorb it, to distill it, to understand it, to reflect on it, to realize, okay, the world's not ending. I'm going to be okay, or I've got options, or whatever it is. And you find it. And then however much time that took, might be an hour, might be a week, might be a month. You put your head up and you go, okay, I'm ready now. Sorry, what'd you say? And all of the other context and information and what everybody else is doing now has an opportunity to get in. And the thing for leaders is that could have happened for that leader when it first happened. When the phone rang and your competitor said, I wonder if you'd like to meet with me. I'm interested in buying your company. I'm interested in us doing a merger, some sort of acquisition. I think we've got mutual, opportunities here that we could each bring to the party. When that conversation happened, that leader in that moment also had a reaction.
Right.
That happened to them too. It's just that happened quite a long time ago.
Right.
And they've incorporated that into their thinking, into their change. And so now here we are, 3 months, 6 months later, and we're in the boardroom and we're announcing it to the team that this is happening, or we're announcing it to thousands of employees across the globe. And I can't tell you often leaders are just shocked at the large reactions that their individual employees have. And it's often just because they've already done the emotional labor way in the background, way in the back. And for them, they're already moving on. They're already living in the future and growing and thinking about their new things. And essentially they have to wait for folks to catch up.
Absolutely. Well, and so I guess knowing that, if you have that wherewithal to understand now that you've processed this for a long time, and now you're introducing this topic to your employees or this event to your employees, and they haven't, what's the process then of introducing it to them and giving them the space they need to really, take that in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So often when large corporate change happens, there's an awful lot that's actually not changing. And I think people skip over that. I like to counsel folks that I work with, spend a lot of time articulating what is not changing. Because that can really calm folks down. It can remind them that maybe the team is going to stay whole. Maybe the office for the foreseeable future won't be changing. Maybe their title and job won't be changing. maybe, the product line that they're working on or the service that they're delivering will still be the same. You can find a whole basket of things that will, be unchanged through this otherwise time of change. And so it doesn't matter if it's something that's as huge as a corporate restructuring or a merger. It could just be the leader of the team is moving on, or the CEO is moving on. And, suddenly everybody has the same reaction, which is, oh my God, fight or flight. What are we doing?
Right.
What's this mean for me? All the things that I talked about earlier. And
Yeah.
so if you can begin with, here's what's happening. This big thing is happening. Here's what's not going to change, and spend a good amount of time on articulating all the things that are solid, and then moving into what questions that they're going to have as they absorb this. So that's the first thing that I would say. And the second thing is to remember to deliver it in a really authentic, personable, honest way, that you're communicating to folks who are in a state of some degree of shock as they're absorbing the information, and that you can't tell what's going to be happening inside their own bodies, especially if you're doing it over on a screen. And so giving people time to reflect, allowing them to know that that this is not a one and done, and that you're going to communicate this in at least two ways. I'm giving you this information the minute I can. I'm giving it to you live. As soon as we get off this call, I'm sending an email to everybody, and it's going to articulate everything that I'm talking about in writing. Some people process information better when it's written. Some people need it to be said directly. Like a CEO could deliver it, in person to a group of people, and there'd be some people that would be grateful. They had the respect to show up and tell me in person. I really respect that. There would be other people that would be like, I just shut down, I powered down, he was talking, I couldn't hear it, I was freaking out. And now I need to read something so I can actually understand what it was that he said. So giving it to them in more than one medium allows a variety of personality types and learning styles, et cetera, to be able to absorb the information in the way that they can. And I'd say the third thing is to remember it's the beginning of a process. It's not the end. You, as the leader, might have had months and months, as I said earlier, to absorb this thing and to bake it into your plans and how you're feeling. This is brand new for them. So they're back where you are. So they need time. And they also need to know that they didn't miss a window. So if you are doing change, you can say, this is just day one of this change process. I know you'll have questions. I'm going to make myself available next Thursday afternoon for an hour where you can bring all your questions. And so there's an invitation to ongoing dialogue and a sorting through of what it's going to mean for me. And that can filter out. If your company's huge and you're global, then obviously you need to leverage your structure. And there needs to be a cascading of information across and down the organization, and empowering leaders to be able to deliver those messages in a clear way and to gather up whatever new unexpected bibs and bobs of local discord that may happen, and to be able to get a centralized answer. So one side of the company in this part of the world is getting the same kind of answer that this side of the company in another part of the world is. So when they're in their meeting that you're not a part of, they're actually not gossiping. They're saying, yeah, that's true for us too, globally.
What, so, how do you advise companies on what's in it for them? So yeah, you're talking about things aren't changing, but I'm just trying to put myself in the person's shoes, and I guess comparative to an owner, right? Because you said, a company comes and says, I want to buy this from you, and an owner knows what's in it for them. I get X amount of dollars, or I get to exit the company. And yeah, there might be things that the owner has fear about, like, oh, do I really want to give up my baby or whatever? But it's very quantifiable. I think, it's easy to like reflect and say, all right, here's the benefits, and here's, maybe here's what I'm losing out on. and process those emotions, versus when if I were to come to a company and say, hey, we're doing a transaction and some things are changing. And like you said, here's maybe what's not changing. But it really doesn't say what's in it for them. Like, they're kind of, I guess, the victim of the circumstance, right? So how do you help, I guess, them process that, or see, the potential, I suppose, of what could be good? Not so much, not just what's not changing, because that might bring me comfort, but why do I really care about this, and how is it going to impact my life in a positive?
Yeah, I love what's inside your question there, because you're right. In addition to what's not changing, there needs to be some room for, and what's in it for me. And so what's in it for me, for an employee, can mean a range of different things. Yes, a piece of it can be, there's a bunch of things that aren't changing and good because I like some of the things that I'm doing. There might be some parts of my job or some parts of the company that I actually don't like and find frustrating. And if that's widely known, like we're in a position of like, we're losing market share, things are really tough around here, there's not a lot of extra money. Well, I mean, if you're getting bought and that's the story, we're going to be absorbed by a healthy, growing, much larger company. I mean, like, that's great for the owner who got bailed out, but it's also great for, the person that's just schlepping away deep in the finance department, or who's trying to get the products and services out to market. Suddenly they've got resources, they've got training, they've got human resources support, they've got IT that they don't have now. There's a whole bunch of things. So, if that's the scenario, then obviously you'll want to really sell that, like why it's good to you and why, it shouldn't be a stampede for the door, because, what you're selling and what somebody's buying has a direct connection to the human capital and the folks that know how to do and deliver on what it is that this company does. And so, it's not great if we have massive turnover right at the time of sale. Now, employees aren't stupid. They also know that two companies coming together are going to be looking to find efficiencies. We probably don't need two of this and two of this. So the fear is real. And when that's as obvious as, day follows night, then, I would probably counsel any CEO to be really obvious and really honest about that. Because, working with your HR team to package people out in a really like fair way, to allow people time to know that, over time we'll be, bringing these two companies together. Like, people know what that means. And giving them time to decide whether or not this new entity, the two that have come together, or if, our company's been eaten by a much larger one, like, what does that mean for me? Do I want to be a part of this new team? Do I like the culture? Do I like the boss? You can flag for them, like, there may be layoffs down the road as we find efficiencies. And that gives me time. If I'm an employee and I'm enterprising, I can think about it and, okay, I've probably got 6 months to find a new job if this thing doesn't work out. Like, I can start to formulate my own plan after I get over the initial shock.
How would you suggest, I guess, working through, because that's a lot of unknowns, right? And there's companies, oftentimes in merger and acquisitions, you're gonna maybe find efficiencies, and there are going to be groups of people that might have to get laid off. But on the other hand, a lot of times, the purchasing company wants to retain, right? And so people sticking around is important. And so trying to overcome some of those fears so they stick around is critical.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if the workforce is the asset that the purchaser is really trying to purchase here, then that'll be baked into the deal. Like, what's in it for the staff to stay? If you're, if there's two tech companies and they're coming together, and it's the engineers that they want to keep, and it's that workforce that they really want, then it's a sales job. Like, because they have a lot of, in some markets at certain periods of the economy, they have a lot of sway and a lot of ability to be able to move around and work wherever they want. And so, what new and interesting opportunities are sitting right in front of them and will come because this much larger company is now coming together, or, the adjacent things that this other company does that we don't do. Now we'll have access to all of that.
Yeah. Mm. And so let's talk a little bit about a merger. Well, I mean, I guess it's true with a merger or acquisition, so maybe it doesn't matter. But one of the challenging things that I think maybe doesn't get enough due diligence is around culture, right? I think when you bring two companies together, it's making sure that the cultures are, at least have a significant amount of overlap, I think is really important. I know of an instance where one of the big four purchased a startup company. And of course, big four is, going to be very structured and bureaucratic and lots of people, which requires lots of policies and procedures, versus, a startup is going to be more flexible. And the owner of that startup was, not very structured person, right? More of your entrepreneurial type. And so over time, the majority of those people that were involved in the acquisition left the purchasing company. So what are your thoughts around culture and the, how you make sure that's there in the beginning, but then how you help people through that transition?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. And sometimes large companies buy small ones precisely because they know that they'll all leave and they don't care. And they don't want this young company nipping at their heels and eating their market share. And the fastest thing to do is give the owner a buyout. So, in those circumstances, you're into the human dynamics of people believing in founders. And that's maybe a different conversation, but like sometimes people join startups and or just smaller firms because they really believe in the vision of the founder or founders. And it becomes not really a logical thing. It becomes a passion, belief-driven thing, a purpose-driven thing. And we see that especially in social purpose companies, for example, when there's founders that have outsized personalities who paint and set a vision. And there are people that just join that. And if that founder ever leaves, whether it's they sell the company or they just move on, the shedding of those employees who joined for that vision is so predictable. And I mean, you see it with CEO turnover anyway. There's certain people that just like the style of the CEO and they joined for him or her, or they over time became accustomed to it and really liked it. And then they leave and there's a new sheriff in town, and it just feels different around here now. And even though nothing substantive is different with their job, they don't, it's like a vibe check, they don't like it. And so they leave. So this stuff comes up when organizations, merge, or when one buys another, because there is a different culture. And I think where it becomes problematic is where a leader stands in front of their smaller firm that is being acquired or is being merged or is somehow being transitioned into a larger entity. And they say, don't worry, we'll stay the same. We won't change. Like, it'll still be us. Our culture will survive. It never works. It never does. And I think it's a bit disingenuous, because I think most leaders know that either if they leave and or if a much larger culture comes and takes them over, that surviving that, I mean, you just can't. Over time, people come and go, and that thing that you built, it's in the past, and the new circumstances are going to dictate that things are going to move on.
What would you say then, like, as the journey unfolds, is there a pattern to people's emotions, like, that they'll go through? Like, is there a framework, I guess?
Yeah, well, they'll ride the Kubler-Ross curve, right? The grief curve. And So, you begin at like a dismay and doubt. You're, as a psychologist would say, you'll go into, some sort of shutdown or freeze flight response. As you start to absorb the information, you can then go into denial and, anger and all these sorts of emotions. Certainly it's true for grief, and it's become true in, over time as we've understood the literature. I mean, that model is very simplistic. It's not actually how any of us experience grief, for example. It's also not exactly how people experience big upsetting change. But what we do know is that most of us will go through most of those experiences over the course of time. And time does tend to make change either stick or not, or allow people to kind of move on or not, and they make choices based on that, or they have them made for them. And so I suppose I think that those sorts of frameworks are quite good, not because there's like a real dip and then you will rise up and thrive, although obviously that is one outcome that can happen. It's more that it's a journey. And that it's not just we're ripping the Band-Aid off, we're telling everybody about the new thing. See you Tuesday, let's do it. Like that people need to like have time to process and need the resources and the collaboration to go through an emotional journey when this thing is being done to them, not with them. They might feel lots of things like betrayal or shame or confusion or whatever. All these different things could be coming up, and all of those things could be in a single room, and they will evolve over time in that single room of folks that work for you or with you. And just know that it's process and that you've already done that. You did it. And I suppose I'm just speaking to the leaders now. Like, you already did it. You did it in private. You've got your CEO group, you've got your coach, you worked it through. And now you got to let them do what you did. But it's amazing. Sometimes I ask CEOs to like think about how long it took from when they first had the faintest little bit of an idea or the phone rang through to completion when they told the thing. And they'll be like, oh, it was like a year or it was 2 years. And I'm like, so why do you want them to get it on an afternoon? Like, why do they only get an afternoon and you've had a year? And, that can kind of help it sink in a bit. And I just think that like offering people time and space and knowing they're going to go on a journey and to be supportive of them, that's the trick of it, I think, for leaders. And, if you're somebody that's happening to you and you're in middle or upper management and you're going through something like this, you are on a journey and your colleagues will be going on a journey too. And their journey will not be identical to yours.
Right.
So to hold some space for them, and, they might be feeling anger and you're like feeling full of hope. Because you're at a different point in your career, because you have different skills than they have, because you don't have, a kid at home that requires the kind of care that they do, or vice versa. And so very context dependent. And that's when having some self-awareness and a lot of compassion for the folks around you will really make for a, as good an experience through it as you can have.
What are some practical, I guess, tips to help them through the journey? Meaning like, I don't, like, obviously you have like the announcement, is that done one-on-one? And then, like you said, an email sent out, like, are there like office hours? I don't know, that people drop in. Like, what are some of the things that you've seen that help, people through that change process?
Yeah, for sure. It's great. So there's a lot of legal, kind of requirements that get the lawyers kind of rule the roost for the first part of this, and for good reason, right? There's a lot of moving parts. There's money at stake. There's human resources law or labor law. There's maybe multiple jurisdictions. It could be different around the world. Like what you can do in Germany versus what you can do in California are probably totally different. And so how a company behaves in one part of its catchment to another might be really different. So, I think being able to communicate those things, why it might be lumpy, how long it's going to take, just make sure that you're like setting up systems, like it's a change process, and that you're setting up a system, you can't over communicate through that kind of change. Formalizing it, allowing, like a big tip I would say is like commit to continual communication, commit to like over communicating, and actually book the times that you're going to do it way in advance. And even if you have nothing to say, do it anyway. Like if you're going to have open office hours for people to bring worried concerns, check in, blah, 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 and anybody can dial in and it's recorded and you're going to share it on the internet or whatever. It's every Friday from 2 until 2:30 from now until the end of time. And you're just going to show up and you're going to hold the space. And they're going to say the same kind of worries and you're going to catch it and you're going to point them to the FAQ and you're going to say, that's a great one. We'll get back to you on that. And I don't know the answer to that. This is a powerful, powerful statement when a CEO says, I don't know. Because it says that they're vulnerable, that they're open, that they don't need to know everything. And, you know, a commitment to getting back to somebody and not having the answer right away just says that they're actually listening and that they care. And, you know, if you were in the trenches and you bravely asked a question in the chat. And your senior regional director or vice president or COO or whatever was holding the space for that. And you bravely said, what about if you blah, 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 but you didn't, no. And they say, no one's asked that yet. I actually don't know the answer to that. I feel like we need to run that by legal or we'd need to get blah. I will get back to you. Thank you for that. Do you know how empowered you feel if that's little you? Like you feel great. And everybody else, here's a leader that doesn't, you know, feel like they need everything. And when you get the email back, that probably comms went and figured out and fired off to you, that makes you feel like you were heard and that you were seen and that people care about you and everybody's watching that. Everybody's watching that.
How do you handle the things like, because you mentioned the lawyers, right? And how do you handle the things you can't say then as a leader, where maybe you do something, but you can't disclose it?
Yeah. And I mean, these are tough. These are the toughest, these are the toughest things. And there's a gap between how transparent leaders would love to be and how much anybody that's not them would actually want to know, because it would freak them out and they'd all run for the door or they'd worry or there's nothing they can do about it. And so finding, like, it's like threading a needle, trying to find that balance between an honest, authentic, transparent approach to leadership and not needlessly worrying everybody. Generally speaking, leaders veer far too much to keeping the information and hoarding it to themselves. And the answer I get often is, what can they do about it? It'll just freak them out. And so, you know, I'm always encouraging people, you know what, they're grown-ups. Like, you know, let's give them a little more. Let's at least tell them when you can tell them. Let's at least say what it's not. Like, there are always things that you can do that can allow folks at your company, at your organization, to know they're working on something. It sounds like it's big. Obviously, it's not ready for, you know, prime time here, but I'm confident and I have trust that they're acting in the best interest of the company and that therefore it's in my best interest. And when they can say, they will tell me everything that I need to know. And I feel like I can trust that. And you can earn that level of trust. It's not blind faith. You've earned that trust because of probably 100 other things you've done as a leader, but also because in this particular case, you could say, you know, we're working on something. It's not something that we can go public with yet. There's lots of lawyers working on this. Just, you know, we'll probably have it shaping up in the next blah, blah, blah. And we just wanted to let you know that this is on the cards. And, you know, as soon as we can, we'll tell you, we promise. And like, even that is better than, where did this come from? Like, how long have they been? They must have been working on this for 9 months, man. Like, you don't have to have that kind of reaction. you can say there's quite a lot more than you can say without disclosing anything or talking outside of school.
Right. What do you think the biggest places that, that maybe we haven't mentioned? Are there any other ways that companies or leaders fail in this or don't give the proper attention? Is there any other gotchas that we haven't talked about?
Is there anything sitting underneath that for you? Are you thinking about anything in particular?
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to, because we talked about, we talked about not having enough time to process the change. We talked about the fear. We talked about what's in it for them, culture differences. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you see from a trend perspective where it's like, oh, why do these companies do this, or why do these leaders do this when they go through this process? If I can't think of anything, but wasn't sure if you see any trends since you work with so many companies like that.
Sometimes, and this would be true for smaller companies, maybe less so for international type companies, but not giving enough thought to the full range of stakeholders that are going to be affected by whatever the change is. And so for me, that means for sure people are thinking about their customers, but are they thinking about their former customers that might come back? Or are they thinking about potential customers that are in the pipeline? So they'll, dutifully email out everybody that's currently, under contract with them about the change and what it might mean. But what about, upstream and downstream? Same with employees. You've got your current employees that are on a thing. What about subcontractors? What about the folks that are coming? Or, maybe you're so big that you have a kind of an alumni group that are still a part of your company, or still a part of the, the broader family. Not that I like that word at all, but those things are really worth mapping out. Maybe, yes, you're going to be communicating to your suppliers, but maybe there's deeper down the supply chain that this could have a knock-on effect that you haven't thought through. And so, I would say they're the blind spots sometimes. Is a question I ask as a coach when somebody's telling me about a problem, and they'll be describing it in general terms, the problem. And I often ask, can you tell me who specifically you're thinking about right now? And it's funny how often it's the leader describes it as, I'm speaking to a room full of people, and maybe they literally are, but actually they're delivering it to one human or two humans.
Okay.
And that's because there's a power dynamic at play, and that they're having big feels about that power dynamic. And so it's actually not a large problem that they're trying to deal with. It's actually a very narrow problem. And once I so it's that you've got a rogue blah, 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 and they're driving you crazy. And so you're thinking about designing this whole thing because of this behavior of one person. Is that what's happening? And they're like, oh my God. What? And so that can be true when we're going through big change as well. You can spend an inordinate amount of time to appease that one union, or that one supplier, or the mayor of the local town that you operate in, or the state government, or whatever. But it's just one of, if you were to map out, like your head of comms has probably got a stakeholder map and a series of bubbles, and overlapping, intersecting bubbles of everybody that cares and is involved in the success of your company or organization. That map can't be, you couldn't do enough work on making sure that that map is really fleshed out, because every single one of them may need custom comms at different times for different reasons. And if you imagine how that information is going to land with them, and how it's going to work, then you can bust through and build out a plan that is going to avoid as many of the pitfalls as possible. And usually it's just a gap. Like, we never communicated with them. Like, how do we miss that? Well, we missed it because we were really, really focused on the staff. We missed it because we were worried about culture so much, or the lawyers said we couldn't talk to anybody, so we didn't talk to anybody. And you're like, oh my God, now they can't supply us with the thing. And, we didn't tell them. And so, really thinking those things through from a stakeholder lens perspective, I think that's what comes up for me.
Is there any rule of thumb for, how much time you should try to give people to work through this? Obviously sometimes you can't control it because it's an agreement between the two companies, but how much time practically does it take to bring employees on the journey before something becomes official and the actual change starts, being implemented?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably very context dependent, Jana, but I would say, if you have any ability to be able to lengthen the time, do it. Give people as much time as possible. The worst that's going to happen is they'll delight you in how quickly they all jump on board and figure their proverbial out. Like, I'll tell you a little story. I was on the senior team of a huge regional hospital, and it was the amalgamation of two previous mid-sized hospitals. And one was a Catholic hospital and one was a civic hospital. I'm in Canada, so we have a certain kind of healthcare here. So let's not go there. But these two hospitals had a forced merger. So they were forced by the provincial government at the time. This was probably 30 years ago. Were forced to come together through a kind of act of consolidation, cost sharing, all those sorts of good corporate things. And flash forward 10 years, and the two buildings were still in play. And I was, one of the things that I was responsible for was branding, marketing, government relations, public relations, communications, all that kind of stuff. That hospital was still two hospitals under a new logo.
Imagine.
10 years later. 10 years later. I mean, and religion was sitting in there as well, right? So, I mean, what we did to bring those two cultures together, and the things that we created internal, cross-functional working groups, moving staff around, secondments, we just actively broke up the flow. And sometimes it's actually like the referral flow of patients, for example, by physicians, rescheduling things in order to make it just, not two hospitals that were like joined by a Tim Hortons, which is like a coffee shop here. And so, like, I saw a real change happen over the course of that time. And it got to a point where we could actually do a rebrand, and it was actually meaningful. Everybody actively participated in this rebranding. And by the time I think I left there, I wasn't hearing them, like, people in the hallway refer to the old hospitals by their names.
Oh, that's good.
So it can take a frightfully long amount of time.
Yeah.
Now that's maybe an extreme example. I'm certainly not sitting here thinking it's going to take you 10 years. But, not all mergers work. Not all acquisitions work. In fact, most don't. And culture can be a big piece of it. And caring a lot about the culture and what are you going to do? It's not just like HR will do that. No, it's like core business, core business around how you're going to set up your two cultures that are coming together for success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've seen, I was part of a merger, and, this is kind of funny. They had 6 systems that did the same thing. And so, as the project manager on the IT side of the merger, I was supposed to, figure out which ones we had to keep and which ones, we would let go. And not one leader wanted to let theirs go. And it was all about ownership and control. And it's like, you don't need 6 duplicative systems. Like, that doesn't make sense. But nobody was willing to even consider possibly letting it go. And the cultures were very different. One was, I think one was based in Canada, one was based in the US, and the US one was very entrepreneurial, even though it was, I think, 2,000 employees. It was a pretty big company, but it was still got a lot of entrepreneurial roots to it. And the other company wasn't. And it got to the point where, you know, basically it lost a lot of, I'm sure there are reasons that I don't know, but eventually that company lost a lot of market share and then was bought. First it was taken public, then it was brought back private, and then it was purchased by an investor group. Because it's just so off track. The cultures never came together for it to be efficient, was what I observed. Now, there may have been lots of things going on that I didn't know about, but it just never seemed to be one company that could operate together efficiently.
Right. And I mean, that story is sadly sort of archetypal of how we do these things. And, you know, it would have been fascinating that the kind of coach advisor part of me hears your story. And I'd be like curious for the people that were holding on so tightly. They would have had personal stories of the procurement, of the design, of the relationships they built with the supplier who ultimately sold them the thing. They probably went through a 2-year process to pick the system way back when.
Or built it. They might have even
built the thing from scratch. And so, you know, on some level, they were all in on this thing. It becomes a part of almost their work identity. And now you want me to just casually let that go and pick either one of the competitive things or something that I don't know. That is very, very hard to do, but it's not impossible. Right. It's not impossible if that transition is built from the ground with people. If you can have people build new agreements together around how they're gonna design workflows and design their culture that they want, there's no reason why we can't have the best of both. And that we can let go the poor performing parts of both cultures and we can create something better. And there are examples of when that's done beautifully and companies grow and go on to do incredible things.
And this, the other thing I observed about this company was that none of the top leadership wanted to drive anything. Right. So it was all left to the M&A team to try to drive it. So nobody was making decisions when these impasses. I mean, your process is, better in the sense of let's get buy-in. But if there is an impasse, nobody would come in and help, at a senior leadership level, align the vision, like say, hey, we really can't have 6 systems or something and enforce that message.
Yeah. And so, I mean, when senior leaders abdicate decision-making responsibilities, I mean, that doesn't create, like an environment for success to ever occur. And I mean, that is why employees get frustrated and they leave.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, this has been a really interesting conversation. I think we got to bring it to a close now. What are the 3 things you want to leave top of mind with folks?
I have also enjoyed this conversation. I would like to say you can't communicate too often and plan it ahead of time. So decide to over communicate and schedule it. The second thing I would say is change is hard and give people the time they need. And the third thing is be self-aware about how you've dealt with change and know that you're not doing it right or wrong, and that the folks around you aren't doing it right or wrong. You're all just doing it your way. And so some grace and space for yourself and for others will get you through it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. How can folks get in touch with you or learn more about what you do? Yeah, for sure. So I'm an executive coach, trusted advisor. I love chatting to people. I write on LinkedIn quite a lot. So, find me there on LinkedIn. My website is clearlythen.com. Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining our show today. Thanks so much, Jenna. And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.